In this week's episode, I'm joined by David Morse, president of New American Dimensions and author of Multicultural Intelligence: 8 Make or Break Rules for Marketing to Race, Ethnicity, and Sexual Orientation. We're going to talk about the intersection of corporate social responsibility and marketing. And I'm going to close by doing something a little bit different this week: a stand up comedy bit generated by ChatGPT. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. David, will you please tell us about yourself?
Thank you, Bernadette. Hi, everyone. I'm David Morse. As Bernadette mentioned, I'm president of a multicultural market research company called New American Dimensions. And I've been in this space for, the last 25 years. I've seen a lot of changes and we keep going.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining with us today. David, I was thinking about the work that you're doing around multicultural marketing. And I also realized that there are so many things happening in the world where corporations are being called upon to take a stance or not. There's a lot of anti-LGBTQ legislation. There are states restricting abortion access, restricting voter access. Sort of what is the role that you see companies having in sharing the positivity here, or maybe not sharing the positivity, because I don't know what that is specifically about those issues, but about sort of doing the right thing and speaking out about those challenges that their employees might be facing?
Thank you. Well, it's a difficult time right now for marketers. America is, no news to anybody, we are very divided right now. And the way that Americans view DEI initiatives and multicultural marketing is also very divided. There are those of us, as an LGBT person, people of color, we like to see ourselves represented. But then there is a pretty substantial group of Americans, tend to be white, tend to be Republican, that do not want to see the kind of diversity or diversity inspired initiatives, that have been commonplace, luckily, thank goodness, for so many companies. I think a lot of it, I think we saw big changes with the murder of George Floyd, where so many of us white folks, saw what a lot of African Americans live with, and that's brutality and violence. And we saw firsthand what goes on. And a lot of people changed their opinions and became more favorable, stronger allies of diversity. And certainly companies were at the forefront of that. But I think there's been a backlash, and I think the word woke sums it up pretty well, or maybe cancel culture. These are views that held by a lot of people that maybe we've gone too far, that teaching diversity, things like critical race theory, are harmful to young white people. So let me pause for a moment.
Absolutely. I think that there is definitely a backlash happening. And part of that backlash means that we're seeing legislation which is really impacting traditionally marginalized folks in a disproportionate way. And do you think that companies should be using their marketing dollars to be speaking out against these issues?
I wish they would. Over the years, I've been more of an advocate for the need for companies to take a stand. In a divided America, I think it's very, very important. And you have companies like Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A that are affirmatively Christian companies. They do not have a pro-LGBTQ stance. That's not how I live my life. That's not how I feel. But I respect that. Now, on the other hand, I think it's time for companies that do see an advantage to their company in terms of dollars and cents, in terms of embracing D&I, certainly in terms of doing what's right and lending a hand to groups of people that have been traditionally, that haven't had the benefits of heterosexual, cis, white people. And, we're definitely seeing a trend in that direction. It seems like a majority of large corporations are heading in the direction of inclusivity and diversity. So I think there's some encouraging signs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Human Rights Campaign does have a business statement on LGBTQ equality, I believe it's called, and a lot of major corporations have signed on to that. However, it's not like we're then seeing them speak out as all of these individual, 600 plus bills are popping up all over the country. 650, I believe, so far this year, anti-LGBTQ bills. So what I'm afraid of is companies sort of signed on to this HRC statement, and then they're not really doing anything else. And I just think that there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think a lot of LGBTQ folks in particular and women, people who menstruate, people who might need reproductive health care. These are folks who are really concerned, and I think they're expecting more.
It's very concerning. When I look to make myself happy, to feel less scared, is I look at Gen Z, and I look at some of the studies that have been done with Gen Z, because I think we're seeing signs, and it particularly in areas like sexual orientation, acceptance of people that are not heterosexual, and especially in the area of gender diversity and embracing that. People my age just have problems with that, but young people do not. I just saw a study that said that I believe it was 25% of Gen Z people believe that or consider themselves to be along the spectrum of gender, of being non-binary, which is an amazing change. It's very difficult for boomers to wrap their arms around, but I think for those of us that are looking for answers and kind of looking to where we're going, I think it speaks very well of this generation, and I think it speaks very favorably of a future where inclusivity is going to be more the norm and less the trigger of opposition, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the census tells us that nearly 50% of Gen Z are people of color. So, me and just thinking about that as a demographic is pretty shocking and beautiful. And I think it's really between that and over 20% of them identifying as somewhere LGBTQ plus. There's no doubting the diversity that's there. So it's really going to be exciting to watch how our industry continues to evolve and how companies continue to respond. Because what I think is beautiful about these younger folks is that they are unapologetic about who they are and what they're looking for in work. And of course, there are some who are, don't feel safe being their authentic selves, of course. But I think that there are a lot of them who are really looking to fully express all of themselves, even at work. So it will be a beautiful evolution.
I agree. I mean, it is a dangerous time to be a transgender person right now. I mean, violence is up. It's higher. I believe it's higher than it's ever been. So there's that dynamic. But by the same token, I think that this new generation. I remember when I came out of the closet to my parents a long time ago. I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire. To be gay back then was you were not accepted. You were beat up. And it's not the case as much. Things have really, really changed. And I think that we're going to see changes in gender and acceptance of gender diversity like we have in the past, like we saw in the past with sexual orientation. But these things take time. But I think Dr. Martin Luther King said that, we see ups and downs, but the flow of social justice, I forget how he thought.
The arc.
The arc over the long run is in the right direction.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Seeing evidence of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, speaking of trans folks in the trans community, this past Friday was Transgender Day of Visibility. And in the Five Things newsletter, I introduced readers to five different trans folks who I encourage you to follow and support. And we'll make sure those trans folks are in the show notes as well. But I'll tell you their names: Celia Daniels, Robbie Samuels, Ashley Brundage, Lily Zheng, and Rhodes Perry are all amazing leaders. Please learn about them in the show notes. Some of them have books. So please support those folks. That's the call to action for this week, because the trans community is definitely under attack for sure. So, David, before we move on to my chat GPT generated stand up comedy bit, will you tell folks what's giving you hope? I mean, Gen Z obviously is giving you hope. What else is giving you hope in this work?
I think look at Time Magazine. This most recent episode, I'm sorry, this most recent edition of Time Magazine is about Bad Bunny, and it is entirely in Spanish. First time in Time Magazine's history was as a cover been in Spanish. The country is changing, and we are, some of us more than others. Some of us it takes time, but we are embracing. We're embracing that change. People are talking about things that didn't get talked about. More and more white folks are talking about, the danger of driving while black and things like that, that were not part of our universe, wasn't part of our cognition 25 years ago. We're talking about Asian hate and stop Asian hate. And we're becoming more and more aware of issues that just never got talked about. And I think that's a really good sign. There's a consciousness.
Did I read that your husband is Native American?
Yes.
I wish we were talking more about their experiences.
Yeah. We've done. In fact, I've done a lot of studies talking to Native Americans about their experience. It's funny what's going on now with the denial of critical race theory, and talking about the unique history of African Americans. And we probably don't talk enough about the history of Native Americans. That was pure out genocide. And we're certainly seeing the results. It is the most socioeconomically disadvantaged multicultural segment in the United States. And, hopefully as we move forward, more and more stuff that never got talked about before, in polite company, so to speak, right, is going to start getting talked about, and awareness will raise. And I do think, alluding back to Dr. King, I think awareness of how other people live and their unique circumstances and hardships. I think we're becoming collectively more and more aware of how other people live. And that's important,
Absolutely. It is so important. And so, David, to close, how can folks find you? How can folks contact you?
Well, my website's, I have a website a little pretentiously named davidmorseauthor.com, but there's information on my books, and there's some videos there, and lots of information. I'm also kind of I don't want to say a hack historian, but I have a master's in history. I've written a lot about racial history because that always interested me too. How did we get to where we are? And that's why it makes me so angry now that we're talking about not teaching history the way it really happened, because it's so important. So anyway, I wrote a book on American legacy, racism, nativism, and white supremacy that people might want to check out, as well as my marketing book.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, David.
David at newamericandimensions.com if you want to reach out, or David at davidmorseauthor.com.
Perfect. We will make sure that gets in the show notes. All right, folks. So I am going to perform. I'm not a stand-up comic at all, but I'm going to perform this chat GPT generated stand-up comedy bit. I asked, last week I was trying to come up with stories for five things. And, sometimes these stories are hard to find. Sometimes it's hard to find good vibes in DEI. One of the things I decided to play around with was having some fun with chat GPT. So I asked them to give me a stand-up comedy bit about diversity. Hey folks, how's everyone doing tonight? So I'm a big believer in diversity. I mean, who doesn't love variety, right? It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and only sticking to one dish. Come on, mix it up a bit. But you know what's funny about diversity? It's that people always talk about it like it's this magical thing that just happens on its own. Like, oh, we just need to be more diverse. Yeah, because the diversity fairy is going to come down and sprinkle some magic dust on us, and suddenly we'll have a rainbow of different backgrounds and perspectives. No, folks, diversity takes effort. It takes intentionality. You can't just wish for it and expect it to happen. It's like planting a garden. You have to prepare the soil, choose the right seeds, water and fertilize it regularly, and keep those pests away. Otherwise, you'll end up with a bunch of weeds and dead plants. And let's be real. Sometimes diversity can be messy. It's like trying to mix oil and water. It doesn't always blend seamlessly. But that's okay, because when you have different people with different ideas, you're going to have some disagreements. And that's when the real magic happens. When you can come together and find common ground despite your differences. So let's embrace diversity, folks. Let's mix it up and create something beautiful. And if you see the diversity fairy, tell her to stop by my house. I could use some more diversity in my life. Thank you and good night.
Wow.
Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for joining 5 Things in 15 Minutes. If you don't already subscribe to the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.